Welcome to this week's episode of Your Stock Request for the 21st of December. Every week I will look at the charts for a few different stocks as requested by you. Just email us at mail@fairmontequities.com. There's a limit of one per person and no guarantee that your stock will be covered depending on the demand. Also, just make sure that you share this video on Facebook and Twitter. The more people that request a stock, the more chance we have to uncover something that's quite interesting. Also, just take note of our disclaimer. Any advice is general only. The first stock today is IMF. This is a weekly chart going back the last several years. As you'll notice, it got absolutely pummeled in 2015 and surprisingly it recovered in a V shape, so you don't see that too often. Just moving in, just zooming into say the last couple of years, we can see that right at the end here for the last few months it started to head up a little bit vertically, not Bitcoin type vertically, but a little bit vertically nonetheless. Having a look at the daily chart, you'll notice the volume down here. So that's quite important to see that volume is kicking into the stock at this point. So even though it's heading up vertically, we might still have a bit more upside, and it might sort of strive for $3. I mean, it's blue sky territory at the moment, but this is the type of stock that if you're holding it, I'd be happy to keep holding it because it looks like it still has some legs. The next stock we have is Grange Resources. So we had this in our research, the Dynamic Investor, going back a number of weeks now. We sort of picked up on it around this point. What I liked was after this deep pullback, it jumped off the low and sort of tracked sideways for a while. And that sideways movement was done on very low volume, which is good. And then it's jumped up on high volume. So that was the point where it became clear it was going to go for a run. At what point does it stop? Well, we could probably pull up our Fibonacci tool and maybe assume that it could do a 61.8, but obviously it's already gone through that. So now we're just at a stage where it'll probably just keep heading up towards this previous peak. Ideally, we want to see it congest under that peak instead of just trying to go straight through, because if it does, it'll hit a lot of selling. But this is the type of stock that probably has at least another 10-15% upside before you might want to consider taking some profit and perhaps re-entering on a dip. Next one we have is Rural Funds. You will notice that it has come back a bit over the last couple of weeks. This is a daily chart. So yesterday we had some pretty good, we had a pretty good reversal there. But what I've noticed is it's generally sitting on this uptrend line. So it tends to be respecting that, which is good. Even though the recent pullback was fairly sharp, I mean, it's probably not too different to some of these pullbacks we've seen here. So it's found the uptrend line, it's bounced off it. So far, so good. I think this thing could continue heading higher. Okay, TPI Enterprises. To be honest, I haven't heard of this before. This is a weekly chart, so it only goes back as far as about 2015. So I guess it hasn't been listed for too long. Clearly, it's found some resistance here. It looks like we've got back in 2016 there was obviously this congestive pattern. So the stock basically fell after listing or whatever happened there, tracked sideways and then broke under that. It's now come back up to test the apex of that triangle and has failed. So at the moment this looks fairly negative and it should head back and retest this low. Maybe it makes a higher low, might even go to a lower low. Not sure, but at the moment I just wouldn't be buying it and I wouldn't be too keen on holding Next one we have is Galaxy. So I covered this one last week. I said that it was, I guess, a crucial couple of days for Galaxy. What I noticed at the time was a head and shoulders. It breached that, came back to retest it. So that's why I said, look, crucial couple of days. If it fails, it's no good. If it gets above it, it's going to keep rallying. Clearly, it went above it. So quite simply, the update is this should continue on to a new high. So overall, Galaxy is looking good. If we move to a weekly chart, we can see that this was the high in early 2017. So after breaching that, what it's done is it's come back to retest that and has launched off it. So it should just continue heading higher. Nanosonics. So this is a weekly chart. I'll just zoom out for the last, say, 5 years. So you could see that it's had a great run up and now it is starting to come back. But when you look at it on I guess a longer term time frame, such as this 5-year chart, you'll see that the recent pullback just resembles that of a flag. In other words, price action is still bullish even though we're getting these big swings shorter term. So flag, we've had sort of an ABC, it's come up to hit resistance, started to fall, but instead of falling all the way back to support, what we've got is it's fallen about halfway, and we could see here, I'll just zoom in a bit. So with these weekly candlesticks, we can see plenty of price rejection around that sort of 250 region. So that's a positive sign. It tells me that the buying's coming back in, and I think that after rejecting off resistance here, it's going to have another go and probably burst through on its next attempt. So I think Nanosonics at the moment looks pretty good. Pushpay, very popular stock at the moment. I'll just go to a daily chart because it hasn't really been trading for too long, but we can see that from earlier this year, it sort of did nothing until July and it just went a bit crazy. Almost doubling in value. Still trending well. All we can really look at is the moves up compared to the moves down, and we could see that the moves up are strong. Any pullbacks are fairly light, and we can see that again here. So far it's doing all the right things, and it has enough momentum that I'd be happy to just continue holding it if I was, until we get clear signs of a reversal. And finally, Pioneer Credit, another one I haven't heard of, but this is a pretty good looking chart. So the weekly chart going back about 2 years, we could see that from mid last year it sort of kicked up and basically doubled in value. Just looking at a daily chart now, sort of a very nice sort of sideways correction, launched off that, and again another fairly sideways correction. So a couple of things that jumped out at me was this was the previous peak here. So it went to a new high and has come back to sit on top of that peak indicated by the line. So that's indication of a strong trend. And even on a shorter time frame, we can see the nice impulsive move up here. So from this low here, it's rallied for 1, 2, 3, 4 days. And then in about 4 weeks, it can't retest that low. So that's a positive. And essentially, if it cracks this, I think it's going to go for another run. So that's also a good looking stock. All right, well, that's it for today. We'll be back in 2 weeks, but send through your requests and I'll cover them for our next video. And once again, make sure you do the right thing. Share the video on Facebook and Twitter, and we'll get a few more interesting stocks.